What actually happens in depression and also happens in PTSD is that the brain is degenerating, it's breaking down. The brain is losing synapses and losing circuits. The frontal cortex and the hippocampus get smaller in depression. And so we need to reverse that. We need to rebuild the brain. And this is why ketamine is such a powerful antidepressant.
Welcome to OTR, Over the Rainbow, Achieving Mental Health for Real. This podcast offers hope to many people who needlessly suffer from mental health issues. Your host, Bob Adelman, brings you information on how you can recover from any mental health issue and achieve a happier life. If you want to know more, please check out his trailer.
Welcome to Part 4 of Real, the best of OTR in 2023. Stay tuned at the end for a message about what's coming up in Season 10. Our first guest is Nicole Kerr. In the episode You Are Deathless, the Hope You Were Looking For. She wrote the book about her near-death experience called You Are Deathless. A near-death experience taught me how to fully live and not fear death. You'll want to listen to this one. Here is the story.
And he wanted to take advantage of me sexually, and I started freaking out. I was like, no, we got to get back. And that was the last thing I remembered until I woke up in the hospital in the ICU the next day. And my memory, Bob, came back 19 years later.
Wow.
Now, isn't that ironic? I die at 19 and my memory comes back 19 years later. And
you didn't remember a thing about the accident for 19 years?
Bright white lights. That's all I could remember was these bright white lights. And I asked the surgeon years later, I said, could these bright white lights, I keep remembering them. And that's the only thing. And I said, could they have been the operating room lights? And she said, absolutely not. You were totally unconscious. And she said, I think it's something else. And of course, when my memory came back and I remembered what happened, that is when Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience, he says that this bright white light, this tunnel of bright white light that people talk about when they have a near-death experience, that is the most common element for all NDEs. And I actually went to Starbucks, got my usual order, and I was on the way to work. And all of a sudden, I remembered exactly how I was sitting in the Corvette. It was a 1965 Corvette convertible. The top was down. We did not have seatbelts on.
Wow.
And needless to say, I had one leg up on the dashboard. The other leg was crossed over. So now it made sense why I cut off, almost completely amputated my left foot. I cut up all the insides of my thighs and vagina, sorry to be graphic, but the vagina area. I severed my right wrist. I broke my pelvis. So that whole part of my body from the waist down took a huge hit. But my spine and my brain were intact for the most part. I had a severe road burn on my face from skidding on the pavement. So I shaved off a couple of layers of skin there. And I was pronounced dead at the scene. My right eye flinched and my pupil dilated. And at that moment, he knew there was some sign of life in me. He just hoped that he could keep me alive. And I don't know, Bob, if you've heard the phrase, the eyes are the window to the soul.
Yeah.
At that point, my soul had left my body when I went through the windshield. And my angel, who I now know is my grandfather, picked me up and took me up to another space. Okay, so I didn't actually feel or hit the ground because I knew when I hit the ground I was going to die. So that angel, he took me up, and my soul left my body when that happened, and I was laying down there in a ditch, and I could see all of this happening. And when I go back to the EMT, when he got that sign from my eye, that was my soul coming right back in through my eye. And at that point, he was able to get a blood pressure on me of 60/0. Yeah, just got a very light slap on the hand. And I do not talk to him. He never apologized to me. I found out later he was an alcoholic. And it just was really, I just wanted to ride back to the academy. And that's what I thought I was getting. And needless to say, when my memory came back, I remembered in detail what happened. I mean, and I talk about this in my book, You Are Deathless.
Did everything come back all at once? Was it just
2 days?
Okay.
Well, actually, the actual going over to the other side was 2 days.
Okay.
I went directly to see my chiropractor after I remembered me sitting in the car, and I didn't go to work that day. And he worked with me. It's called Repressed Memories. And he did some body work, and I started remembering with his guidance, here's what's happening. And then I had gotten to that point. We have a lot of souls that are leaving the planet right now. And this is a time for people to start looking at death in a positive way. And that's why I talk about, the 10 common lessons from near-death experiencers. And the first one is we do not die. I am here to tell you that the body, the physical body, yes, it decays, it dies. But once you die, your energy body, it opens up and your soul goes right straight up. So it's important for people to understand that if they're fearing death, they're not going to live. They're not going to really live life because they're always going to be in fear. And fear is a very low vibration. And if that's running your decision making, you're not going to make good decisions for yourself. And there's another part of healing that a lot of people don't know about, and that's called soul loss. And I don't know if you're familiar with that as well.
No, I never heard that term. What's that?
Okay,
What's that?
so, well, we all have a soul, okay? And when the crash happened, parts of my soul left me. And how do I know that? Well, there's 3 symptoms. I didn't want to come back here. And I said that on the other side. When he said, my angel grandfather said, you're going to go back and you need to tell people not to be afraid of death. I was like, oh no, I don't want to go back. I don't want to get in that body because first of all, the body is going to be painful and a lot of suffering because there's a lot of injuries. Second of all, I'm going to go back to a state of infancy where I'm going to be dependent on my mother and father again because I can't even walk or go to the bathroom by myself. And thirdly, I didn't trust the God that they believed in, that concept of the God that they raised us with and still believed in. And I didn't want to go back and be told I got to go back to, this church again and sit there and listen to this message that I don't, at some level, did not believe in.
Being true to yourself and others is a godlike act that we have to stop spinning, lying, justifying things.
Absolutely. Yes. And there is something called spiritual amnesia, and there's something called spiritual bypassing and spiritual abuse. And that goes in there with mental abuse as well. But those are terms that have not really been talked about, and we can spend a whole show on those alone. But I wanted to just go back to the soul loss, if there's anybody there. It's a low-level, consistent feeling that something is missing. I have had a low-grade depression. It's part of my PTSD since this happened. And it's interesting to note that many of your compulsive behaviors and addictions fall into this statement. And now for me, I can clearly see the link between my compulsive eating, binge eating, but it wasn't called binge eating back in the 80s. And that lasted for 20 years until I got married. And my feeling of emptiness, it was just because I had no connection with the spiritual realm, God, anything. I was just trying to go forward on my own. And lastly, I cannot get over it this trauma. I just can't get over it. And for me, I just felt stuck with my chronic health conditions and hypervigilance, above all, about keeping myself safe, the need to control my environment and myself so that something like this would never happen again. And my soul left me as a means of self-protection. And I really wish I knew earlier that although this was unavoidable or necessary at the time of my trauma, neglecting that hurt, fragmented part of my soul and going on with life with it fragmented has led to other problems such as the depression.
And everyone is fragmented. Everyone has an insecurity that's deep down. I call it the first layer. That's pure fear. That's pure fear. And above that layer, you have different acts that they do to make themselves feel better, like physical or making money or sex or anything. You have this layer that they try to cover up the first layer with, and then on top of that we have addiction, which is another form of covering up.
There's nothing outside of yourself that's going to fix you. You have to do the work, and it finally comes. It shows up last in the physical body, but you start the work at the spiritual, emotional level. You do all of that work, and then finally your body, once you get those pieces in alignment, your body starts turning around and healing. I used to worry so much about, safety and needing to control things. And now I'm just free from that because I know if it's my time, I'm going to go, and I'm okay with death now. And I just know that I'm here for a reason, and I'm just at the infancy of that. And I'm just grateful that you put me on your show today. And I hope I've helped someone. You can check out my website at NicoleKerr, KERR.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn.
Make sure you check out Nicole Kerr in the You Are Deathless, the Hope You Are Looking For episode. Nicole's links will be in the description of this Real Part 4 episode. Let's shift gears to talk about handling relationships and other issues with ADHD as I talk to an old friend, Natasha Maryanksuk, in the episode Don't Dim Your Light, ADHD Issues and Relationships.
And today we'll be talking about ADHD relationships and some of the hardships that we go through. For instance, I think we find it difficult to learn by just memorizing details and the conventional cookie cutter way they teach. Natasha, do you agree that there's problems in these areas?
Yes, Bob, I do. And it has been a struggle since I am a child, and thanks to the medication, it has helped me a lot, and it was a game changer for me since I started the medication. But also, there is a lot to consider with the medication. It's like nutrition is very important. It's very important to feed your body as you age. It's very important to take your supplements. It's very important to have a diet of high protein each day.
You know what? I eat chocolate chip cookies, ice cream. I really have to do what you're doing. I think that would help me. I don't know about a lot, but it would help me. And God, I need help. My main problems is that you can't explain this problem to other people. They're basically, we don't care. We can't do anything. We don't believe you have it. You're a narcissist. You're mean. You're rude. You don't listen. All of these things I've talked about many a times. But it's good to have the validation that I'm not the only one that's out there. Could you tell us about your relationships and the hardships you might have with those relationships?
Yes, but first I want to tell you, you're definitely not the only one here. And I can see there is more and more people sharing their story about their ADHD and ADD. To my experience, I have always have good relationship with people. As I age more and more, I learn how to deal with my ADHD.
What effect do you think ADHD has on your relationships?
I'm doing better. Look, I'm 42 years old now. I'm doing much better. The thing is, like, when you are ADD and ADHD, you cannot connect with anyone. And that's why maybe some people, they find nobody understand them, because you have to find your tribe. You have to find your community where people are like you. And there are many, many of them. Now, more I express myself and more I find people like me. It doesn't mean they're going to have the same brain, because we all have a different brain. We all function differently. And what works for me will not maybe works for others. I'm very careful about my relationships, the people I hang out. The thing is, like, you have to set your boundary all the time with people. And if you stay with people who judge you because of your behavior, which is linked to ADHD, it's not a good environment. I have been always selective with the people I talk to and very careful. And more you experience that, and more you know what people you have to talk about it or not.
So I find it extremely difficult to explain this problem to a person that doesn't have it.
Yes. It was also my battle and my big struggle when I was younger. I mean, when I was child and teenager, I didn't know what was wrong with me, why I could not understand, and why I could not find any connection with other people. And I could not understand why other kids and students were doing well at school. And me, I was not even interested. I was not finding any interest, any motivation going at school, because I did not have the capacity to understand the instruction, just a simple instruction. I did not have the capacity to follow what was taught at school. And I find it very useless and very unnecessary.
The way they taught us in school was a lot of details, memorize it. And like you said, when we got directions, like you 4 people go in the corner and do this, that, and the other thing, I was always lost. I had a bad short-term memory my entire life. I used to show up to a classroom in college, and I didn't even have the class because I was confused that I had this teacher somewhere else. So now I'm supposed to go to the class that I'm not supposed to be in. So everything, if I go to the airport, it's just unbelievable. I can't do anything. My mind freezes up and I just can't do anything. And over the years, I would sit in my car when I got home at night and I would say, why? Why am I so different? Why am I like a reject? Why do people abuse me? Because that's what I got. I don't know about you, but I got tons of abuse from my so-called friends. Did you experience anything like that?
Yeah, probably, of course. But the abuse issue is also our lesson to not let people in or surrounding and abuse us, because feeling abused is first we abuse ourselves and we let those people abusing us. And as long as we let them and we allow them to abuse us, we will feel abused. So we have to break this cycle and this repetitive pattern in order to not feel abused, to not attract those abusive people, because more you're going to feel like a victim and more you're going to be surrounded by those people.
Join me as I talk to Sue Horton, who wrote the book Raising a Resilient Family: How to Create Strong Connection and Communication in a Deeply Distracted World. There are unprecedented statistics on depression and anxiety, suicide, and drug overdoses among our young children. Parents need real ideas on how to stay in touch and connected to their children. This clip is from the episode Unprecedented: Alarming Mental Condition of Our Children.
I became what they call parentified, so I was the the oldest living at home at the time, and my two older siblings were off. One was in college, and one had gone off to live an independent life. So there I was with my younger sister, who was 14. So she needed support, and my mom just couldn't function. She really had what I guess we'd call today a nervous breakdown. And she ended up leaving. She ended up abandoning us, within a short period of time.
Oh my God. That is a terrible way to grow up. I'm sorry.
Well, it ended up, being I think it lends, specifically to what I do today. I think when we figure out how to survive and thrive despite, these very harsh, difficult experiences, traumas really, that's what, like you're doing, you want to then teach how you did that successfully and how you survived and what were some of the strategies you used to get through that. And that's been, part of why I became who I am today. So.
What is the name of your book?
It's called Raising a Resilient Family.
Okay.
And it's, how to create strong connection and communication in a deeply distracted world.
Okay. And I read that it caters to teenagers. We had a girl on the show called Amy, and she would cut herself, and her whole body was cut up. There's so much self-harm, so much suicide, so much mental disorders where people don't know what to do. So what does your book go into as far as helping parents and other people try to reach these teenagers?
Yeah, I have a big belief that finding passions and purpose in your life help you heal and move forward from disappointments and distractions and traumas. So I really invite parents and kids to really look at what it is they're inherently good at. What are their tendencies and talents? What do they do while they're doing it that they don't experience the passage of time, for example? And you'll find that if you ask that question, most teens have something they can point towards. And I'm not talking about video games, by the way, or, any sort of substance use or social media. I'm talking about things that, while you're doing them, you're completely engaged intellectually and you're challenged in some way to improve somehow in that effort. And it engages you in a way like nothing else. And again, you don't notice the passage of time because you're so involved with it. And it, it can take the form of a creative endeavor, art, music, writing, dance. There's just been so much research on creative behaviors and activities actually help us move out of an anxious moment more than any other kind of activity and endeavor. So I always encourage kids, when they're having a moment of panic, if they paint, if they play an instrument, if they sing, dance, whatever it might be, if they write, they journal to help them. Those, by moving into an activity like that in a moment of, an anxious moment, it will move the mind into another part of the brain and it'll calm you almost instantaneously. There's all kinds of breathing techniques that in DBT and those kinds of strategies that also work, being in the moment, being mindful of what you're feeling and, you're getting your senses lined up with the present moment also helps, with an anxiety, experience. However, I have worked with so many teenagers in, a residential setting where we would, try different things like creative, experiences, and physical ones too, like hiking and wilderness type, strategies and challenges that, there's something about engaging the mind differently in the moment that will shift you out of that, that place of high anxiety
John Lee is back. He helped me with 2 other episodes, and now we discuss lies, chasing truth. This episode talks about the lies people tell with an emphasis on justification, the most damaging lie of all. When people lie to cover up which would normally be morally wrong. Enjoy these clips from Lies Chasing Truth.
How you doing, John?
I'm well, Bob. How are you?
I'm doing great. Doing great. Today, I wanted to talk about lies with you. If the audience remembers John Lee, we did a couple of shows with John a while back in December of 2021. It was What is the Meaning of Life? We also did the show, What is Consciousness? Can it be reproduced? What do we do with it? So we got John back again because I was trying to get this done by myself, but it was getting too preachy and too monotone. So I figured a conversation would be better. The topic is lies, untruth. John, do you want to make an opening comment about lies?
I guess the first thought is there may be this preconception out there that maybe all lies are bad. I don't know. I don't think all lies are necessarily bad or morally wrong. I think some white lies, some small lies we tell as a form of politeness, of social convention, to be kind to one another, to smooth social interaction. So I don't consider those things morally wrong.
And that segues right into what I wanted to try to do with this is there's so many lies that exist, they had to categorize it, or I have to categorize it. John was speaking about the white lie, which is typically if somebody asks, how are you doing? Even though you feel miserable, you might say, I'm doing okay. The other one we like a lot is exaggeration. And that's pretty much just a lie, but it's like a used car salesman. He's going to exaggerate every part of the car. So it's not a direct lie. They also call that like a spin. So,
Bending the truth.
Yeah. Political people do a lot of spinning. You know, they have a spin room after a presidential address, for instance. And, so I think that we do a lot of spinning and exaggerating. One of the things I think we exaggerate is ourselves. Would you agree with me on that, Joe?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think the thought that comes to mind is at the moment is everything we do is motivated. Setting that premise, white lies tend to be motivated by kindness, to not hurt the person we're speaking to smooth an interaction, etc. I think exaggeration can go both ways. A car salesman that's trying to get a sale, they're motivated by profit. They may exaggerate the truth to win that sale, and that may not be the best motivation. If they're stretching the truth beyond reality, that would be, I think, morally questionable. But again, I think the motive is what matters. If your motive is good, then exaggerating the truth can be okay.
Yeah, I think when you talk about sale, a lot of it has to do with, I guess, I'm searching for integrity in a person. Propaganda. Now, to me, propaganda is an exaggeration, but it's a specific type meant to, usually in a government, will hand out propaganda, but it could be other people. But mostly it's a large group that wants another group to believe something. For instance, that all Russians are bad. Back in the 60s when we had the Cuban Missile Crisis and, of course, the Cold War, we want to make people believe a certain group is bad. Back in WW2, all Japanese people hated Americans, and Americans hated Japanese. Not all. I can't say all. But a large majority were motivated by their hatred of the other group. Okay? It may have been what I'm going to get to next, which I think is the most damaging of all lies, in my opinion. on a humble is justification. I think that's a real big one. In other words, what can you say to yourself or others that will defend something that probably is morally incorrect?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, a good example of that is American Indians. When we first, well, they weren't Americans back then, they were just people,
Mm-hmm.
and we pretty much eliminated them, but we still hated them. Same thing happened with Nazi Germany.
I've got a couple of thoughts rolling in my head, but the first thought I had was around the Nazis. There was a quote that I remember where someone said, the Nazis first killed the Jews because they hated them, but then afterwards they started hating the Jews because they killed them. So there's an idea there around our behavior also fueling these emotions. And then the other thought was going back to one of the first points is all communication is motivated. Just realizing that, and propaganda is just another form of motivated communication. I'm just realizing that, like, there's no neutral communication.
Very little. I think maybe if you get to know somebody really well or love that person, you tend to just tell them the truth about yourself, what your fears are.
Yeah.
How about integrity? That's a big word, integrity. I mean, if you watch TV, all right, we know what integrity is. It's on TV, but it's not practiced. For example, if you watch any of the Star Trek series, everyone on the show has integrity, a fake integrity, exaggerated integrity, a lie, basically. Because when I grew up and I watched TV, I was very influenced by it. And I thought everybody was like Star Trek, where they helped each other, they did nice things to each other, and they were like a family. I think the show was unrealistic, which is why it's on TV, and it's why it's not real life. I don't understand why more people don't want to be more like those TV shows. Is it just they can't? They don't want to? It's just a dream? Will we evolve into something like that? What do you think about that? Because I struggle
I'm not
with
as pessimistic.
it.
Yeah, I'm not as pessimistic about that. I mean, I think, as far as I can tell, everyone is trying their best to be as integrated, like you said, to have as much integrity as they can possibly have. Some people have more of a capacity to live that way, to live truthfully and honestly than others. But I think everyone's trying the best they can. Everyone's failing. But I think very few people have given up altogether on trying to be quote unquote good people.
I guess I struggle with understanding people that don't want to reach the truth or they put other things ahead of the truth, which like money and power. That's the thing I have trouble with. Whether you believe in God or not, to me, truth is the holy grail.
A word that's coming to my mind is self-worth. I do think everyone is searching for self-worth. So that sense of I am a somebody. I have done something, or I am significant. I have worth. I think everyone is in search of that. And you're right. I think everyone is going to look for that in different ways. I mean, the big one is money. The big one is, okay, if I have X amount of money, then that's like a very easy way to justify my self-worth. So I do think human beings are cursed in that way. We're always searching for something outside of ourselves to give us that self-worth. And we're never going to get it.
But is it other people? Like, is it other, like, what was Adolf Hitler's motivation? He needed love from everyone, I guess. Is it what we, do we seek the love? Or is it just the thing?
I think it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
I think some people will search for self-worth and power. Money also gives people power. So again, like it's interesting that Jesus said you can't serve both money and God.
Mm-hmm.
So that phrase comes to mind pretty often because it's such an easy one to fall into. Like, we always look for ways to make more money, thinking that
or
that's
get power.
Yeah, or power. Money gives you power, but at the end of the day, it doesn't satisfy, and we are bombarded. There's so much. We're overwhelmed with evidence that doesn't satisfy. There are people with power and wealth that kill themselves every single day, that hate themselves. That I just read an article today that I think it was like 30 or 40% of women over 65 or 60 are on antidepressants in the United States. Just the number of people on antidepressants is mind-boggling.
Do you think it has something to do with our modern way of life? In other words, our diets are terrible, and I think that leads to depression. Not only that, the doctors march to the tune of depression. What's going to make them money? Oh, we'll get them some more pills.
Right.
So I think a lot of people are misled.
I think diet's a good. I think that's a good analogy. I think yes, the modern situation. A lot more people today are atheists than they were in the past. We've lost religion in our culture. We're a post-Christian society, and religion was in the U.S. and in Western Europe was a big source of meaning and self-worth in the past. It still is for, I think, most of the world. So having lost that, we are going to the junk food of career and money and popularity online or wherever to try to feed ourselves.
Right. We look for the comment section. How many likes we got today. Look at what's going on with bullying. Look at people that are taking their lives as children.
Dr. Theodora Henderson, MD, PhD, is president and founder of Neuroluminance, Inc., which is bringing revolutionary treatments to bear upon traumatic brain injury, depression, Alzheimer's disease, post-COVID fatigue syndrome, and other brain disorders. He holds 3 patents and 3 patents pending. He is published in neuroimaging, psychopharmacology, dementia, photobiomodulation, and traumatic brain injury. His recent book is Brighter Days Ahead, which is about new innovative treatments like ketamine and infrared therapy for long COVID, along with other brain treatments. A must listen before you get treatment with ketamine or are thinking about it.
How do we treat ADHD? I mean, right now it's stimulants, right? They increase the dopamine, just like you said, and they work for 6-8 hours if you're lucky, and then they wear off, and then the mornings and the evenings suck. So here's what we're finding. We have been treating patients with infrared light and seeing really good results, whether we're talking about treating traumatic brain injury, depression, PTSD, long COVID, or ADHD. And, before I explain infrared light, can I just play a little audio clip of one of my patients?
Yeah. Go for it.
All right. So I'll just set this up. This is a dentist, and he signed an ROI, so I can talk about him. And he's a dentist who developed long COVID, and he had the brain fog and the fatigue, and he developed a tremor, which is like not a good thing for a dentist. Now, that all occurred on top of, he had a lifetime of ADHD, and he took Vyvanse, which is a stimulant,
Right.
for his ADHD. And so here's what he had to say.
I got bonuses out of the treatment. You don't think I'm ever going to have to get ADHD medication refilled. I don't think I'll ever need a benzo again.
That's his experience. He came in for treatment for long COVID. He got infrared light therapy, which I'll explain in a little bit.
Right.
And around about treatment 14, he pulls me aside and says, "Doc, this is weird. All of a sudden, my Vyvanse is making me jittery." So I stopped taking it. And holy smokes, I can focus just fine. So what we did, my colleague and I, we went into the laboratory and said, how do we grow this up so that it works on humans and gets through the scalp and the skull of a human and does what Harvard was showing in mice? Because let me tell you, the human skull is much thicker than a mouse skull, mine being thicker than most. So, we had to kind of have enough power at the surface to get through. And so we figured out how to do that. And so we were able to then, deliver the kind of energy that Harvard was delivering to mice and showing that they were turning on brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which controls and induces neuroplasticity in the human brain. We treated him, and he went from just being a mess. He couldn't hold a job. He was about to get divorced. He was financially ruined. And now he's, a successful electrician working for the local brewery here. He's been doing great for 10 years.
Now, would someone have to go in for this? They must have to go in a local laboratory of some type.
Yeah, it's a hands-on treatment, and it's a 20, 30 treatments, hands-on, twice a week, takes about 30 minutes. But you do have to be present. I can't beam the laser through the computer.
So I would have to fly to Colorado, or how does that work?
Yep. And we have patients doing that all the time. We got a patient coming in from Florida this week. We got a patient coming in from Canada next week. People fly in from all over.
How long is the process?
So, let's. It depends from person to person. So let's pick an average. The average patient gets about 20 treatments. So if we're going 2 treatments a week, that works out to about 10 weeks. If we really press it and they can tolerate 3 times a week, then, we can do it in a shorter amount of time. Let me explain a little bit about ketamine in the first place. So ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic. At low doses, it feels like you take a step or 2 back from yourself, and you can get some perspective on yourself. At bigger doses, then, you trip out and, you see, pink elephants and, all sorts of floaty things. And then if you get really, really big doses, it basically acts as an anesthetic and it knocks you out. Now, ketamine is a very, very safe anesthetic. It's the most commonly used anesthetic in children's hospitals. And the reason is that it'll knock you out, but it doesn't suppress your breathing. And that's an important thing. Now, the discovery that ketamine helped depression came about 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And I opened the first ketamine clinic in Colorado and the 13th clinic in the country, and that was 10 years ago. Now, our understanding of ketamine has grown, and what we know is that ketamine actually turns on that same neuroplasticity. It turns on BDNF. And in fact, it's the most powerful chemical that can activate BDNF that we know of.
What's BDNF? Is that dopamine?
It's not dopamine related. It's really more related to turning on the brain's own ability to rebuild itself.
Okay.
Because what people don't understand is that, we're all taught, depression is about not enough serotonin or not enough dopamine. And that really has been disproven. What actually happens in depression and also happens in PTSD is that the brain is degenerating. It's breaking down. The brain is losing synapses and losing circuits. The frontal cortex and the hippocampus get smaller in depression. And so we need to reverse that. We need to rebuild the brain. And this is why ketamine is such a powerful antidepressant. Now, the problem comes in that the average ketamine clinic, and these days you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a ketamine clinic. They're all over the place. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry decided to open one. The problem is that they're all following this protocol of giving ketamine 3 times a week for 2 weeks for a total of 6 treatments. Now, the problem with that is that it ignores the fact that how ketamine works is by turning on neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity takes time. I never, ever, ever treat a patient more than once a week in 10 years. In fact, it's often week 1, week 2, week 4, week 7. And the average number of treatments that my patients get is 4.3. Not 6, not 6 plus boosters, 4.3 in their lifetime. Depression's gone. Thanks a lot, doc. Have a nice life. And why is that true? It's because I respect the neuroplasticity. I respect that it takes time for neuroplasticity to happen. And that's why these ketamine clinics do something really wrong, and it wastes a lot of ketamine. That's to do these 6 infusions in 2 weeks. Now, the second thing they do wrong is that point you hit on. Oh, I don't want to go and have a bad trip, doc. Well, here's the reality. To turn on neuroplasticity, you don't need to give high doses of ketamine. Low doses, the starting dose, 0.5 milligram per kilogram over 40 minutes, that is enough to turn on neuroplasticity. That's what I've done for 10 years. These guys that now, there's a myth out there. Oh, you have to hallucinate to cure depression. That's nonsense. That's poppycock. So these guys who are out there giving 1 milligram per kilogram, 1.5 milligram per kilogram, all they do is make people sick and upset, and they don't make them better.
Is this something that could be done virtually?
Ketamine? No.
Okay.
And I think that's malpractice because ketamine has very rare but very serious side effects. And so when I administer ketamine, I have a nurse anesthetist, a highly trained nurse with advanced training in anesthesia. They sit in the room the entire time taking Q5 vitals. Now, thank God, and knocking on wood, I've never had to pull out my crash cart. I've never had to pull out my defibrillator. In 10 years, hundreds and hundreds of patients, but those remain real risks. That ketamine administered with no medical supervision, it could be harmful.
Could you take us through a trip? I mean, what does it feel like to take the medicine?
Well,
ketamine.
I had, for about 8 years, I had not ever, I had no experience with what ketamine felt like. And one of my colleagues said, "Hey, look, you are giving this to patients and you have no idea what it feels like. You need to test this out." So I had one of the nurses administer ketamine to me one day in the standard protocol. So I can tell you my personal experience. The first 10 minutes feels a bit like, 2 shots of vodka. A little tingly, little relaxed, little woozy. And then you start to kind of get in, kind of go inside. And so I was seeing swirling colors and hearing sounds that sort of were like whale song, that was my personal experience. And it's at that point, my friend, that I began to worry. With all my training, I began to worry, oh gosh, what if I go to some bad place? What if I go to some bad, atrocious memory that I have? Oh my, that could be terrifying. So I'm thinking this in my head. And I said, hold it a second. I'm in control of this. I can go wherever I want. And so I said, let's go to a happy memory. And I picked the happiest memory I have. And so I got to go back to and relive in beautiful, wonderful detail and slow motion and just relish this beautiful experience. So it was amazing. It was wonderful. And then, the infusion ran to the end, and I started to drift away from that, and I started to become aware of the blood pressure cuff on my arm, and the feel of the infusion chair under me. And 15 minutes later, I'm up and back to doing stuff, making phone calls, shuffling paper. It was a beautiful experience.
I have such a problem with giving up control. I'm very control oriented. One of my biggest fears is that I guess I'll lose my mind. I don't know what I'm thinking, but it's a fear. My biggest problem was fearing fear. I fear the fact that I might be so afraid that I can't stand it anymore. So that's the kind of background I have. So I don't know how I would react to letting go. It might be good, but I don't know.
Well, and lots of my patients over the years have, talked about this idea of, that they fear losing control. And that's one of the things they don't like about it. And quite frankly, a small proportion of them, when they receive a ketamine infusion, they don't really like it because they do feel a little out of control. When the infusion ends, everything goes back to normal. Within 15, 20 minutes, you're up, able to walk around and, get a ride home. But, they don't like that. Now, here's the thing to keep in mind. It doesn't matter whether you like the infusion or not. It still turns on neuroplasticity. The molecular biology doesn't care whether you're having a good time or not. And therefore, even though they don't like the infusions, their depression gets better.
Okay, but you never had a case or heard of a case where a person basically lost their mind from it?
No.
Yeah.
No. In fact, in all the 10 years, we've only had one person hallucinate in all that time.
Wow. Okay. Maybe I'll try. I got to get the nerve up to try it.
Yeah. So my goal is for people not to hallucinate, but you got to understand that, these other clinics out there, they're giving, big dog doses of ketamine in this stupid, uneducated allegiance to this myth that a person must hallucinate in order to get an antidepressant benefit. And there's zero data to support that. My paper back in 2015 disproved that. Multiple papers since then have disproved it. It's a myth. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people adhere to it. So you go to, Joe Blow Ketamine Clinic there in New Jersey, God only knows. But, tell them not to go above 0.5 milligram per kilogram. Okay. That's the one place, You have control over the dosing. You can say, look, don't go above that, Gotcha. And so it doesn't matter where you are in the country. To all of your listeners, it's like, don't let them tell you that you had to have a horrible experience. You can have a nice experience. 0.5 milligram per kilogram turns on the molecular biology just fine.
Right. I mean, that's a very good description of it. Do you have a website where people can look at all the different treatments that you offer?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's www.neuroluminance.com. I'm going to spell that. Neuro, Neuro -luminance, LUMINANCE. And a lot of what we're talking about, I describe in my book, which is available on Amazon.
Right. I was just going to ask you about your book. Yeah. What is the name and what is it about?
So it's called Brighter Days Ahead: Leaving Depression Behind Through Innovative New Treatments. And in many ways, we've already talked about the book. I talk about in the book. I make the point that depression is not what we've been told it is. It's not about serotonin. It's not about chemical imbalances. That's hogwash that we've been fed for years. I use ketamine as a model, but I spend, a lot of detail on ketamine, talking about, how ketamine works. I have a whole chapter on frequently asked questions about ketamine, ketamine and bipolar, ketamine in this medicine or that medicine. How's it compared to TMS? How's it compared to shock therapy, et cetera, et cetera? I also talk about, choosing a clinic. You don't want to choose a clinic that after your infusion, they, kick you out the door and you end up curled up in the hallway of the building, passed out. You don't want that experience. But, this is experiences that patients and reporters and other people have told me about over the years. And I capture some of that in the book. I also talk about what it means if ketamine doesn't work. Okay, because everybody, that's their worst fear, right? I'm at the end of the line. I've tried everything else. I'm going to try this crazy ketamine stuff. God only knows. And then they worry, what if it doesn't work for me? Well, it doesn't work for 28% of people. And what's the reason? Well, the reason is that they have something else causing their depression. Remember at the beginning, I said, these psychiatric terms are garbage pail terms. Depression isn't one thing. You could be depressed because you have a traumatic brain injury. You could be depressed because you have an infection in your brain, a viral infection in your brain. You can be depressed because you have a tick-borne illness that is causing psychiatric symptoms.
With COVID is a good example. I think people got depressed.
Absolutely.
They got long COVID. And,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But the conventional medicines do work to a point, but they seem to kind of give up at a certain point. And they bring you out of a bad depression, but as far as making you a content, happy person, they fall a little short.
Absolutely.
I recently got into a alternative medicine called Pramipixel. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
It is supposed to produce more dopamine, and it changed my life in a way because it got rid of my apathy and it got rid of a lot of my depression. But I believe it actually increased anxiety a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's good medicine. I mean, it's excellent. I don't think I would have gotten through the last couple of years because they've been very bumpy without that medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a godsend, and I can't imagine feeling great the whole day. I have happy moments. I'm super better. I'm much better than I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But there are still times of the day, like midday, like now, where I'm not really myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm either sleepy, I fall asleep, and so there's no exact. At night, I get tired, so then I get depressed a little bit. So the morning is great, the afternoon is not that great. Part of the night is very good, but then late at night, because I'm not ready for bed, but my body is, I guess. So there hasn't been a permanent solution. And I talk to a lot of people, and a lot of people can't find one where you don't have these episodes. You don't have the demons on your back. I mean, I'm constantly being attacked by, not voices, but just memories or emotions that scare me. And, I do my best to be brave through them, but I went through a couple really bad depressions, and I don't want anything to do with that anymore. And hopefully I'm in a safe area, but I'm almost willing to start going after the other alternative ideas like ketamine. And I think a lot of people out there are very interested in this as well. So I really have to thank you for coming on and explaining all of this.
Next, I speak with Ella Flaherty about the many issues of ADHD. Ellie talks about ADHDers' need for fun and gives a lot of great advice on how to make the life of a person with ADHD easier and how we can come to terms with the issue. Ella Flaherty is an executive coach and performance optimization speaker with a subspecialty in ADHD coaching. Her specialty is presenting serious issues in a humorous and engaging way. The episode is called ADHD for Real: Practical Advice for Coping with ADHD.
But our real specialty and subspecialty is ADHD coaching. So we work with lots and lots of people from the community. I am also, of course, ADHD, and all of our ADHD coaches are also from the community.
Great. The audience is heavy ADHD because I have very bad ADHD, which I blame for everything else. So when you were growing up, what was your environment like as a child?
Well, Good question. I guess growing up in Virginia in the 1980s, of course, girls did not get ADHD. So I was spared from that until we realized that girls could get ADHD. And I wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult as a result. So it was a real challenge. It definitely was, going through school and assuming that I was all the usual things that we tell ourselves, lazy, irresponsible, not fulfilling my potential. And so it was a challenge because my ADHD, of course, made it really difficult to excel in school in a conventional way. I was lucky that I didn't particularly need to study, and I kind of did everything last minute and it worked out okay. Even all the way through law school. I was a lawyer for almost 20 years, but once I understood ADHD, everything became just so much easier.
When I was a child, they didn't even hear of anything like ADHD. You know, it was like, you know, I'm 65, so it was like World War II parents, you know, they don't, mental health, oh, what's that? And so I suffered greatly. I developed OCD and depression, anxiety. And I also suffered a low self-esteem because my brothers were there to pound me on every mistake that I made. And they pretty much didn't let me talk at the table because they'd cut me off. And so I still have a fear of talking a little bit better on a microphone. But I do have problems with remembering words sometimes and saying them wrong and mispronouncing things. So it was a mess. Until about when I was 6 years old, you know, doing the show and then going on Facebook groups. And I learned that everybody had the same problem. I really thought I was totally alone. And I think a lot of my audience and a lot of people out there think they're alone. And that's the message I want to send out, is that they're not alone. And there's no embarrassment about it being ADHD. You learn a different way. You need to have certain things that they're not offering in school sometimes. So it becomes a real pest. So I guess just from what I read in your background is that you have found a way where it's a little bit more fun to be ADHD. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And first, let me just agree with everything you just said. I definitely went through that myself when I was training as an ADHD coach. The light bulbs just constantly were going off, understanding the things that I did and how they were completely normal for ADHD people. And I really think as a coach, that's one of the biggest things that gifts I can give to my clients in the early days of our sessions, is just letting them know that things are totally normal for our community and there's nothing wrong with our brains. They just work differently, which is part of how I went down the road of finding a more joyful life for myself and really appreciating and accepting my ADHD. As I said, I used to be an attorney. I was a litigator, a trade negotiator, which was incredibly detail-oriented, sort of solitary work and just not really well suited to my brain. So I made a huge, huge career change. And I've changed pretty much everything so that now my business is very ADHD friendly. I've set up my physical environment to be ADHD friendly. I've just made all these changes. And I'm really, really glad you used the word fun, because it's the one thing that I always ask clients. I say, are you having fun? And most people can't answer the question. They have no idea what they do for fun, if they're having fun. They never think about it. And I always tell them we have an interest-based brain. And one of the things that our brain craves is fun and, of course, interest. And so adding those things into our lives is the most positive way to lean into ADHD strengths and to help us really excel and find happiness, essentially.
Next, I speak with Michelle Shekina, author of the book From the Floor to the Door. This is about domestic violence, which is a big problem that goes silent when a person is trapped and dependent in a relationship. In 1997, Michelle married who she thought was her fairy tale, knight in shining armor. In 2014, her life started to unravel. Things escalated quickly, And the next thing she knew, she was being sexually abused by her husband, which turned into her husband sex trafficking her to his friends. The episode is called Sex Trafficking in Suburbia.
So I am a woman who was married for quite a while, over 20 years, and I am a healthcare worker. I am a survivor of domestic violence. I have 2 children and a wonderful family that supports me now, thankfully. Being a survivor, what happened was I was happily married, or so I thought. I was happily married for a good 16 to 17 years, and then something changed. I realized that there were things going on kind of behind my back or to the side with my former husband that didn't seem right. And I had spoken to him, and then I found out that he was using drugs.
Oh, boy.
And yeah, and here it was, I'm raising a household. I'm supporting him with his businesses. I had some of my own. I was, a PTA president. I was a room mom. I was a community volunteer. I was doing all of that.
How old were your kids when you found this out?
My kids were in their teens. They're adults now. They were in their teens.
Okay.
And so I was, at that time, a different person than I am now. I was very much a people pleaser, as everyone says now. It's like a key phrase.
Mm-hmm.
I did not have the confidence because he was really and is still very, very smart. He did what's called grooming, which means that he created this facade of who he was with me. He knew all of my insecurities and exploited them, not only, in front of me, but to other people. And he made me very dependent on him as far as emotionally, financially, all of that, because I was a stay-at-home mother. Even though I had a professional license, we had agreed, or mostly he had agreed, that I would not work because that's part of the control. So at this point, I had noticed his attention was not as much on me. It was on other people. And as a lot of women do in the situation, I did everything I could to keep my marriage and my husband and my family intact.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, he took that and he rolled with it. And so he started making me use those drugs. And some people will say you had a choice. And unless you've been in that situation, especially as a woman who's given up all of her power, there's no choice. And if there's resistance, there's abuse.
Can I ask you what drug that was?
It was mostly cocaine.
Okay.
And it was something that I had never done. I never knew. I wasn't around it ever. I never saw it. I didn't understand any of it. And I didn't know that he did until he finally told me, oh, I used to do this in college. I was like, what? This is after, again, 17, 18 years of being married to this person.
And he never did it in those 17 years? Or?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Did he hide it?
He hid everything. I mean, he hid everything, which I have since found out. Either people have approached me with things that were going on, or I have found out through his Venmo account or health insurance, things that he was getting prescribed to him. So for him, it wasn't just cocaine. It was more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But going back, so what had happened was a very slow progression of him exploiting me and trafficking me to,
really?
yeah,
That's unbelievable.
to his friends.
Oh,
And
no.
yeah, because it was, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't even know the name of it. He had started off with saying, hey, let's be more adventurous in the bedroom. And again, that woman that gave her power away said, I'll do whatever you want. Just stay here. Just focus on me. Let me be enough.
My next guest is Dr. Leslie Dobson. She is a forensic and clinical psychologist who has worked in very dangerous environments throughout the years. Dr. Dobson has spent over 20 years in the assessment and treatment of mental health disorders in individual and group therapy, and criminal and civil law. She now has a private practice, using her education and training from working in a prison, a state mental hospital, and treating high-risk sex offenders just released from prison as a psychologist. She works today mostly with first responders like police and firemen with PTSD and testifies in civil litigations. The episode name is Inside Criminal Psychology with Dr. Leslie Dobson.
This is a mental health show, so I always start off with, how was your childhood? Because that has a lot to do with the rest of your life normally. So how would you rank your childhood?
I think I had good parts and I had bad parts, but as I get older, I definitely realize that there were pretty significant bad parts that I didn't know were happening at the time. So I reflect on both of those. I was born in Canada. I moved homes many, many times, even before the fourth grade. And I definitely think when I moved to Southern California around the age of 12 or 13, I really started to struggle with the perfection and the pressure of this pretty superficial area. So I definitely felt like an outsider, and there were times where I didn't feel support from my family, and I felt very isolated, and that became depressive thoughts, kind of a dark side where I was more isolated from people and longing for friendships. And we moved schools a lot. We moved homes and neighborhoods a lot. I didn't have a lot of friends. And until I started really engaging in my education in college was when I really understood what friendships were.
What college did you go to?
I started at Colorado State, and it was fabulous. I loved it there. But then I actually studied abroad to England to finish my bachelor's degree in Northern England in Leicester. The Americans call it Leicester, and then the English get very mad at us.
That sounds good.
I continued on to a master's degree at the University of London, and then I eventually returned back to California at Loma Linda University for a master's and a doctorate in psychology.
Terrific. So out of college, how did you start? Did you start a private practice, or how did your career take off?
I became very interested in severe mental health because it was really unimaginable to me. I had never been around severely ill people. I had never been in a prison. I had never been in a state hospital. And so I decided that my first experience on the clinical side was going to be at the Los Angeles County Jail. And I worked with a psychologist there to start a clinical experience for students.
Okay.
And I have to be honest, my driving force was that everyone told me I couldn't do it.
Right. So, but you got the job, you interviewed and got the job?
Yes, I got the clinical training, so it was unpaid. We don't get paid for a long time.
Okay. Were you living at home still? Or
I was living at home, and I was actually driving 4 hours each way to get to the jail for the experience.
Wow. That's dedication.
It was. I had a very old Ford Focus car. It was light blue, and I remember crying in it a lot.
Oh boy, that's not good. Have you ever had any bouts with depression at all after that?
I felt, I had situational depression where I was very lonely and lost when I lived in England, or every time there was a large transition in life, I didn't really know how to handle it, and I would have depressive symptoms. But I think the worst part was I almost died around 2005. I had a perforation in my colon, and I had to have a colostomy.
Oh, no.
And it's since been reversed and fixed, but I'll never forget. Those were the first and the last times I thought about suicide. And I will always have such compassion and empathy for people who think about suicide, because I have never felt such a darkness in my life.
Yeah. Well, it's no fun. I went through severe depression, anxiety. It was definitely a low point in my life. I thought I was going to commit suicide. My sister kind of bailed me out. She had the same problem. It's inherited. So I had to hang in there for months, like 6 to 9 months it took before everything got a little bit better. But it's not a good thing.
Oh, it was incredible. It was incredible meeting these people and being able to help a lot of them see that life can be better and we don't have to stay in the illness, that there are tools we can learn, that there's medicine we can take, and encouraging them through that year was really meaningful. So I actually moved to San Francisco, California, and I started working with high-risk sex offenders. I was working with individuals who had committed very extreme crimes regarding sex, and
As a psychologist?
As a psychologist in an outpatient setting. So there was no security, and they would come in, we would work together, and they would leave, and it was pretty scary. And I remember one moment where one of them looked at me and he said, "Are we alone in this building?" And it was nighttime, Civic Center, San Francisco. It was a pretty dangerous area. And I felt this chill go through my entire body. And I felt like, wow, he is intending to harm me. And so I lied and said we were not alone. And I knew in that moment he could tell I was lying.
Got lucky.
Yes.
Did you carry any mace or a gun or anything like that?
I always have pepper spray, and I have other legal weapons I keep with me. But no, I've never had a gun. I definitely think more and more about carrying a gun in this environment. But being Canadian, it's quite we were raised that guns were not really a part of our world.
So, how long did you stay at this job that was pretty dangerous?
I actually only stayed working with sex offenders for a year. And then I was hired with my husband, who was a psychologist too. We went to Atascadero State Hospital, which is Central California, and it's a maximum security facility where you have active inmates or you have individuals who have served their terms in prison but are still too dangerous to leave. And so they're treated as patients in the facility.
So you wound up in this hospital, you said?
Yes, I walked the halls of that hospital for about 6 years.
Oh,
it was 2,000 staff members and about 1,200 inmates and patients.
Did you ever have trouble with people in the hospital? Did they give you any problems?
Every day, multiple times a day. We wore alarms on our hips that it looks like a Tic-Tac box, and you would pop it open if someone was going to assault you. And then you would run. Did
you have a guard or anybody that could help you right away?
So, California is very underfunded. We had a lot of security officers that were around, but no one was ever stationed anywhere. And so a lot of the time it would be clinicians, nurses, social workers, line staff who would run to the emergencies. And the emergencies were 6, 10, 20 times a day, every day. And they were violent episodes.
Wow. So did you ever get hurt or anything?
I got thrown against a wall once. I had my chest grabbed once. But a lot of the time I was able to get away from actually being physically touched. So there were many attempts, but I was able to circumvent it. And my husband was thrown over a chair. He was definitely harmed more because he would try and help stop a violent episode from happening, when I tended to back away a bit because I have no skill in that area.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I would do, but I'd be scared to death, I'm sure.
I was scared to death, and I definitely still have symptoms of trauma from that job.
Like PTSD, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I don't think I would meet full criteria for PTSD, but I get nightmares. I'm very hypervigilant. I can read a room in a second. I know every exit. I don't mean to, but I profile everyone the minute I meet them. And it's what I learn to keep myself safe.
Out of everything?
I have to say that's where I feel the most alive and the most connected is just talking with someone and helping them move through their stuck points and their struggles. But if you asked me what I like the most financially, that's definitely working for the court system.
I got you. Yeah, that makes sense.
I hope you are all caught up on the show. Look for more best of segments at the year's end, covering 2024 and 2025. It is my hope that you found something helpful for your journey. As we move on to season 10, I would like to share some thoughts. This show was created to address issues related to mental illness and the associated stigma and neglect. It is important to take care of your mental health and not let depression dominate your life. Opening up to safe individuals and expressing emotions such as crying can be beneficial for healing from any condition. Like in The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, Over the Rainbow, Dorothy learns that sometimes the answers that we are looking for are within ourselves. Maintaining mental health is critical, and different resources may work for different individuals. While some shows claim to have all the answers, it is important to recognize that each person's situation is unique. My own experience involves chemical imbalances, and I have found that proper brain chemistry, along with exercise, a healthy diet, counseling, and support groups, are all helpful on the road to recovery. It is essential to seek help if you are struggling with severe depression or other severe mental health issues. Many people suffer needlessly when effective treatments are available. There will be an upcoming show featuring a doctor who claims to have a cure for many mental health issues. It is hoped that advancements in medicine will continue to improve the treatment of mental illnesses and replace self-inflicted harm that many of us use to cope. My doctor found a medication effective for those unresponsive to SSRIs, which significantly improved my condition. While I continue to manage anxiety, OCD, ADHD, and dyslexia, I am committed to helping others find solutions. There are no excuses now for not seeking help for mental health issues. As far as in future episodes, I think I'll stick with the voiceover for intro, since I don't pretend to be a professional host. Life has its challenges, but there's also much good to appreciate.